want to welcome you all to The Gateway.
The Gateway is a video podcast directed and hosted by staff members of Somerset Community College's student newspaper, The Bridge.
This is The Gateway.
Good evening, SCC, and welcome to The Gateway's very first Halloween special. I am your host, Count Eli Particula.
And I am your local Hufflepuff student, Makayla Scott.
And with us today, okay, I'm not going to do the accent anymore, is the curator of Somerset's very own International Paranormal Museum and Research Center, Mr. Kyle Kadel.
Hey, how's it going?
It is going. I'm glad to have you today.
Thanks so much for asking me to come on.
And thank you for coming on. Funny story about asking you to come on, because we were hoping to shoot this last week, but some circumstances kind of came up in the life of Mr. Kyle Kadel. Would you care to share us this said incident?
I had one of the worst days of my life last week. So I was in Nashville for a conference. It's called Strange Realities, and it's a bunch of weirdos talking about weird things. It was a 3-day long one, and the last day I was in Nashville. Actually, we were my friend Nathan that I went with and actually presented. He had already left to go home. He has a wife and kids and stuff. I decided I was going to, make a nice last day of Nashville, and I parked downtown in a parking garage to go get brunch. After that, I was going to go to some bookstores and some record stores. And I go inside this place, have a great brunch, and I was in there away from my car for about an hour, and I came back, and someone had smashed my passenger window in and had robbed me of minuscule stuff. There wasn't a lot of valuables. They didn't take my laptop, which, thank goodness, But, they got, a phone charger and, $4 and, I don't know, $20, $30 worth of stuff. But it was much less convenient to have to, drive to Walmart with a busted window and then go and get gloves and everything and try to clean out all of this window instead of going to bookstores like I wanted to do. So eventually I get all that done, and I'm like, all right, I'm just going to drive home. I have a tarp for a window now. I don't want to hang out in Nashville all day. And so it was right after sunset, and I was getting back home. I was probably an hour away from home, and I was on the Cumberland Parkway here, and a deer ran out in front of my car, and I swerved to try to miss it, but it still hit the side of my car and went all down the side of it. And, I'm swerving, I was going, 70 miles an hour, and I'm afraid that I'm going to, tumble over. And, neither of those things have ever happened to me. My car window's never been smashed in, and I've never hit a deer. And I had them both happen on the exact same day. Dang. And so that was a pretty rough day. And that is why I was not here last week.
So it is way more than understandable.
Yeah, definitely.
Lightning really struck more than once that day.
I know. How who did I make mad,
God was like, nope. But anyway, now that we finally have you, let's get into it. So we're going to go way back, pre-paranormal, maybe some paranormal. I don't know the whole circumstances of that, but we can get into that. So you actually attended here at SCC, correct?
I did in 2005, I want to say. Mm-hmm. I did one full semester and then part of another semester here.
Oh, what were you going for?
At that time, I was torn between music education and English literature. Don't know what I would have done with either of those degrees. Dang. But I guess English lit would always help no matter what. But music education, I guess, is, unless you're going to be a music teacher, it's kind of just I didn't
even know they even had those programs offered here.
I was here when I was still doing my under stuff. I was going to switch to Eastern State because they had one of the best music education programs at the time. Don't know if that's still true 15 plus years later.
Yeah.
Nice.
They do have a great music program.
Well, that's awesome.
I played trumpet in high school, and I loved music, and that's the way I kind of thought my life was going to go. Either that or my dream job always has been and always probably will be having a show like Sesame Street that I write for and do the music for and stuff.
Oh my
God.
Awesome.
I think that would be so cool, and just to make quality kids entertainment that's also, I don't know, worth watching, you
Oh,
know.
that'd be so. Oh
That would
my
be
gosh,
great.
I'd definitely pay to watch that.
Yeah.
So, also here at SEC, we've been told that you were actually a part of the bridge. Is that correct?
I wasn't on the bridge, but
Mm.
one of my best friends and one of the guys I started ghost hunting with actually was. His name was Zach, and he actually wrote the article, and we did a ghost investigation of the campus here at SCC for the Halloween edition. I want to say 2005, maybe 2006, somewhere in there. But we investigated over at the cemetery with the Revolutionary War graves over there, which are some of the oldest in the county, by the way. And then we did, supposedly the library here is haunted. And so we investigated the library. I think the only thing we caught on camera was the door to one of the bathrooms like opened by itself, like while we were there, and that's like one of the main reports we've heard. And then, of course, we investigated the notoriously haunted Stoner Theater here on campus, and we actually have this photo. I don't know if I could even still find it, but we took it from the stage at the section of chairs, and there's a couple people, like it was a night vision photo, and there's a couple people in a couple of the chairs, and you can tell them out. And then there's what looks like a person in one of the front row chairs, and it's not someone that was with us. And so that was like the
No.
best photo we got
Oh my
while we were in
gosh.
there. Yeah.
That's creepy. Are there names to these ghosts that allegedly haunt the campus?
Not that I know of or can remember at this point. I don't. We obviously tried to. I think that the one Revolutionary War soldier's name is Stephen Smith or something, and we tried talking to him directly out there. But as far as the library or the Stoner Theater, I don't know. It seems like every theater is haunted, though.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's, a physical ghost or the, ghost of all the energy that's been expended in there,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So,
Got a Phantom of the Opera type deal there.
yeah, exactly.
That's cool,
Macbeth.
though. Yeah. Oh, yeah. But yeah, that's cool covering, like, the paranormal activity that even reaches out to the school like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm not originally from here, but I moved to Somerset in, 98 when I was, in 8th grade. So basically I've been here my whole life,
Okay. What brought you here?
Well, my great-grandmother's originally from here, and she moved up to Chicago, and that's where I was born and all those generations lived. And when my grandmother died, my mom wanted us to move down here. I was young enough. She wanted me to get out of the city and, enjoy the life down here, which I'm glad she did that, It would have been a lot different growing up in Chicago than in Somerset, of course.
Oh, yeah, definitely. You've definitely built up a life for yourself and brought a legacy definitely to Somerset.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we want to dig
Yeah,
into that legacy.
who knows if that museum, the museum would happen in Chicago? So,
Dang. Awesome. Glad it happened here, though.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, where exactly did your interest in the paranormal start?
That's kind of a tough question. I feel like ever since I was little, I've always grew up watching, Star Trek and X-Files and In Search of and Unsolved Mysteries and that kind of stuff. And so I always grew up thinking about that kind of stuff. In high school, me and my aforementioned friend Zach started hanging out and watching. It was the very beginning of Ghost Hunter TV shows, and there's a lot of specials back then, like one-offs, and we were obsessed with those. And growing up here in this small town, there wasn't a whole lot to do, so we eventually decided we loved thinking about this. He grew up similarly to where he also loved Star Trek and thinking the what if questions and everything, and we enjoyed that type of thought, but we never truly believed it. And so we started out trying to disprove these ghost hunting shows, that things would happen. And about 3 months in, enough had happened to kind of change our minds and make us what we called open skeptics at the time. So we definitely had enough experiences that it kept us questioning and kept us going on, searching for the next thing,
Okay.
And then a few years into ghost hunting, we were actually at downtown Somerset Cemetery here and saw a UFO in the middle of our ghost hunt. We weren't getting very much ghost activity. And back then, we definitely thought everything was separated. I think of a more like theory of relativity for it all now, where it's all kind of interconnected. But at the time, I thought of, I didn't believe in UFOs at that point, and then we saw one, and I thought that like ghosts were specifically the spirits of the people that were alive that, now who knows, because so many alien encounters have like dead friends that are seen by the contactees, and there's so much like crossover evidence for everything, even Bigfoot and ghosts and aliens, and all of it kind of seems interconnected, like it all comes from the same place,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I didn't think that at the time, and it kind of blew our mind that we saw a UFO in the middle of a ghost hunt, and that kind of opened our eyes to all the other paranormal stuff, and that was probably in 2007, and so here we are in 2021, and I'm still into it all, so.
Oh, damn. Can you give us more can you give us a case where you're trying to disprove something other than the cemetery case, I'm sure, that you were proven wrong and you're like, oh, this paranormal stuff might be legit?
Yeah, I'd say kind of the paranormal straw that broke the camel's back to turn me into a believer. We had enough where we recorded different voices at cemeteries and stuff, enough of that weird kind of stuff and weird photos that we weren't completely sold at that point. At least I wasn't. But eventually there was this one night, again at downtown Somerset Cemetery, where me and another investigator took our friend out that had never been out on a ghost hunt or anything. And basically, we were just trying to scare him. We weren't really trying to ghost hunt. We were just trying to mess with our friend, And we were doing an audio recording where I was holding the audio recorder, and Zach was taking a photo of me. We would do this thing where we would pose for a photo, with both hands open, and say, or just take a photo like that, and then we'd ask for something to show itself over our hands if it could, and we'd compare the two photos. If something showed up in the second one that wasn't there in the first, we thought it could be evidence, indication of, activity. So we were trying to do that, and I was holding the audio recorder, and Zach was trying to take my photo on our digital camera that had new batteries in it, and the batteries started dying, which is sometimes a sign of activity. And he turned the camera on, tried to take it, it died. He turned it on again, and it died again. And so on the audio recorder, you can hear him say, "Kyle, I don't think it's going to take it." Well, fast forward to us being back at his house, and we're listening to the audio tape, the recorder, and as soon as he says, "I don't think it's going to take it," a fourth voice that was a female, that our other friend was a male, so we had no females with us, butt in and basically mocked him, said, "Gonna take it." He said, "I don't think it's gonna take it. Gonna take it." And so that was the weirdest thing, that it was a clear human voice, clearly repeating what it just heard my friend say, and that shows intelligence, and that shows interaction and everything. And so we're like, all right, that's really strange. Well, about 4 nights later, I was at my house. It was probably 2 a.m., and I was getting ready to go to bed. Back then we had a computer room where the family computer was, and I was at it listening to music. And back then iTunes would fade out, and there'd be 2 or 3 seconds of silence, and then the next song would fade in. And the one song faded out, and I went to close iTunes, and just before I could, that exact voice from the audio recorder came from the doorway, and it said, "Kyle."
Oh my
And
gosh.
it said my name. It's clear as day, and I know it was that exact voice. It said Kyle. And so instead of turning iTunes off. Like, I turned it way up, and I was up for another, 3 hours, and, just pretending I didn't hear it. Eventually, I went to sleep when I was exhausted, And so the next day, I went over to Zach's house, and I told him this whole thing, and I kind of assumed he would think, he'd laugh or something, but he didn't. He said, well, I wasn't going to say this, but he said the night before that happened to you, I was in my bed and, had just covered up with my covers and closed my eyes, and right, from here, a foot in front of his face where his eyes was closed, he heard that same voice go, "Hey, Zach."
Oh, my gosh.
So that we ended up having a recording from a strange voice in the cemetery, and then within a week, we both heard that same voice in our bedroom or in our houses say our names. So that was kind of the linchpin that made us decide, all right, there's definitely something going on to this. This is not just our imagination.
Definitely. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Some of that sticks with you, by golly.
Yeah.
So, do you have a certain belief system? Are there things you don't believe, or you believe more than others?
I'm pretty open to all of it. The way I think about everything is that, Whitley Strieber, who's the author of Communion, one of the most famous alien encounter books ever, we actually get a lot of our pop culture ideas of aliens from his encounters. He even says that he's not convinced that the beings are flesh and blood creatures, that there's a whole physical but psychological side to it all, to where your own preconceptions of what this thing is going to be influences it to make it what it is. For instance, 400 years ago, if someone saw a red light acting crazy in the sky, they would have thought it was a lantern on a witch's broom, because that's what people believed 400 years ago, and they'd think that they just saw a witch. Now we would think it's a UFO. 2,000 years ago, you would have thought it was a chariot of fire or something from heaven, And so, the idea that there's so many interpretations of what something could be really shape it into what it is. Because I truly believe, there's a term called an egregore. And an egregore is basically the living consciousness of anything in the world that is brought to life by belief in it. So the idea of America as a country has an egregore, and the idea of Beyonce has an egregore, and everything in the world that people have put energy into thinking about or having in their lives or anything like that, TV has an egregore. So it's this almost living, breathing thought form based on what our thoughts are, and a digital example of that would be when something's trending on Twitter. All of a sudden, everyone's talking about the same thing, and that thing takes on its life of its own and then affects the news later, So that's kind of the metaphysical, or the example for the metaphysical thing that is a egregore. It's similar to the idea of a tulpa, which is a thought form from India that, on Supernatural, they fight a tulpa once. And it's basically... it's basically whatever you think it is. In that episode of Supernatural, there was a legend on a website, on a blog, saying that this house was haunted by this, and this is how it manifests. And so that's what happened. And then they changed the story on the website, and then it changed how it presented itself, because that's how everyone believed in it. And I think that a lot of what that I've interacted with thinking was a ghost, or things that I've seen that I thought could be a UFO or whatever, anything like that, it could just be partially my reflection of what I think it should be. I'm not saying it's not an actual phenomenon, and that there aren't, I'm saying that that things are even weirder than we think, that it's even harder to explain than we often think. Oh, well, Bigfoot's just a flesh and blood creature that science hasn't discovered yet. Well, no, maybe that's not true. Maybe it's a, ghost of thought, you know, or maybe it's a being from another dimension. Maybe it's who's driving UFOs, you know, like who knows? Like the further you get into it, like when we first started, we thought, like I said, we thought we were looking for ghosts, and we thought a ghost was a spirit of a dead person that's no longer alive. But now, like, I have no idea. What if it is someone from another infinite universe, and there's just like, for some reason, we're able to record them for a second because there's a thin spot between our universe and theirs, and they're living their lives, and if they can hear us, they think we're the ghost, you know, or something like that. I don't know. It's very interesting. There's a, not to keep on talking, but
I'll go on.
there's this book called The Philip Experiment that basically, I forget which college did it, but they basically rented a house that has never had any accounts of hauntings or anything like that. It was just a regular house, and scientists from a college set up this thing where they basically 3D printed the idea of a ghost named Philip in that house, where they every day would come up with another element to his story and then think about Philip like he was really someone that lived in this house, and then act like this house was haunted by the ghost of Philip, and then they'd have people try to do exorcisms for Philip or try to contact Philip. And they did this for a set amount of time and then moved out of the house and then started offering it to paranormal investigators as a haunted house. And group after group got evidence of a spirit named Philip that lived in his life and died in this house. And it was all this, you know, fiction that was made up by the team that tried to do this, you know. And they had no contact. They had no idea of any of the things that went on before it. And so it's just interesting to think that, like, you know, what you may think about the paranormal or the weird is even just a small facet of what it could be, you know?
Yeah. So what you described there could be kind of classified as like a placebo haunting. Because if it's like you take the sugar pill and you think, oh, this is going to make me feel better, and you start feeling better, it's because your mindset was like that. Or in a more, I guess, kind of a paranormal way, like if you're home alone in the dark or whatever, and you think you hear like creaking floors and you're like, oh, there must be someone in here or something like that. Even though more than likely you're just alone.
Yeah, exactly. And even the idea of a placebo is one of the most normalized concepts of the paranormal, that literally the power of belief makes you better. Like, that you are thinking a new reality into existence. Obviously, it's not going to have you grow a new arm or something like that. There's limits to that. But, like, the idea that, like, the placebo is a, like, scientifically studied, proven thing, the effect is. And it really is just saying, yeah, people's beliefs affect their reality, you know? And so that's, like, even more evidence to that we are in an integral part to the paranormal, you know? The paranormal is, like, defined by, like, things that happen, you know? There's, like, if you think of a data sheet and, like, a car crash happens and you put it here, and like all these normal mundane things happen and you kind of get a picture of reality. But then someone sees the Mothman and that's way outside the picture of reality. Those outliers are really what define reality. The things that aren't reality are what make us realize what is reality, you know? It's like, oh, this is crazy, supposedly it happened, but it's not like going and dropping your kids off at school, you know, like that's a normal part of life, not running into a ghost that threw a book at you, you know? So it's just interesting to think those things that we question whether they did happen or could happen are what makes us decide what does happen, you know?
Dang. So I guess reality is pretty much what you do make of it.
Exactly. To an extent, I absolutely believe that.
But, sorry, you go.
So what would you say to people who are skeptics and who are non-believers?
I mean, as a museum owner, I get people that come in that, like, not everything in my museum is serious. You know, there's a bag of alien-themed chips from England, and there's, like, different sodas named after animals and stuff in there. We have funny stuff in our museum, too, because I don't think of it as my job with the museum to make anyone believe anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if you think of like a regular, like a Smithsonian museum, it has religious artifacts from religions all over the world, and the curator's job isn't to make anyone's like mind change about like, yes, the Mayans' ideas of gods were correct.
Mm-hmm.
It was just to present this, and like I believe some of what we cover. There's other things I struggle with, but again, adding the idea that anything can happen because we're part of the equation, like makes me more open to believing that people saw werewolves and stuff, you know?
Mhm.
Because like, I mean, think about if a person just fixates on werewolves their whole life, they see something that they can't explain, it's going to be a werewolf, you know?
Yeah.
So maybe it was a werewolf, maybe it wasn't, you know? But especially with the museum, I don't think it's my job to like convince people, but as like an investigator, I like to have evidence, and if there's not evidence, I just like to ask the question, what if, you know? I think that there's, especially in today's day, there's a very serious issue with people automatically distrusting things, and like a lot of like the thought processes that I run around in like are next door to some of these crazy conspiracy theories and stuff, you know? And like I think that there's either way, I think you shouldn't take anything too serious, whether you believe in it or not. I think you should be able to have critical thinking skills to think about what if this is true, what if this isn't true, and then let yourself decide, you know? Like, if someone's a skeptic because they refuse to believe anything, like James Randi, the amazing Randi, was this incredible magician that turned into like the world's biggest like debunker, like exposer, and it's because he ran into a lot of people that like with psychic surgery healed and stuff, like people taking advantage of people, like using magic tricks to say it's psychic power, and like as a trained magician, he could tell that and he would expose it. And I think that's good. Like, I don't think that anyone should use anything, whether it's the paranormal or not, to take advantage of other people. But I think that if you devote your whole life to saying, no, this is impossible, you really narrow down, like, what is possible, you know? Because if you're wondering what something could be, that question has infinite answers. But if you get an answer about what it is, that immediately cuts down that infinity to one possible answer, you know? So sometimes it's better to wonder, what is this, than to actually have the answer, you know?
Right.
Like reading a book and then not reading the last chapter, so the story just goes on in your mind.
No.
You
Oh,
know?
dang. That's a scary thought on its own. Well, I think a lot of what you said goes far beyond just the paranormal. Like, the news media, like, the goal of it should strive to be as objective as possible, or not objective, I don't know, I'm bad with that word. But you know what I mean, to get the facts out there and the point of views and not lean towards one way or the other. And I think that definitely fits in to the pandemic, especially because there's a lot of paranoia and skepticism and like people going on about the mask mandate, vaccines. So
all the conspiracy theories that go along with it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I learned at the conference I mentioned I went to in Nashville, I learned a great saying that kind of differentiates. Like, I like thinking about, I don't know, let's say a crazy conspiracy theory like the JFK assassination. That doesn't mean I like thinking about flat Earth or the government's lying with every word and this vaccine's meant to kill everyone. Like, there's conspiracy theories and then there's conspiracy without theories. And that's what I learned, that conspiracy theories are these things that people keep on talking about JFK because, like, they research and look up more facts, like hard facts. And people are doing, like, let's say anti-vax stuff because they're looking up what other people are saying. It's not fact-driven conspiracy like research. It's all like anecdotal. And so the idea, I'm not trying to force my ideas onto anyone else here. If someone doesn't want to take the vaccine, that's their prerogative. But like the way that it's captured the world and is like well, if you're politically charged this way, you should believe this about the vaccine. And if you feel this way about human morality, you should feel this. Like, the way that it's been politically charged, that's the conspiracy, like, and it's so interesting to see that, like, basically it doesn't come back to different interpretations of facts. It comes down to alternative facts, It's like, I subscribe to these people and what they say, you subscribe to these people and what they say. There's no common ground, where classic ones are like with the moon landing being faked. I believe it happened, by the way. But like, there's so much like interesting things with like Stanley Kubrick's like little signs that can be interpreted in his movies, and things that he'd said that could be interpreted this way. And like, there's so much like interesting fact-based research done into stuff like that. That, I mean, clearly the facts show that the moon landing did happen, but like, it's still based in those facts and listening to what the other person has to say, rather than just like, I believe black and white, right or wrong, so.
Gotta look at the gray in between.
Exactly, so. And like, I really think critical thinking comes down to the basis of it all, whether you're thinking about, ghosts, or like, and that, I'm sure that some people think that's ridiculous. If you exercise critical thinking the way they do, I'm sure that you wouldn't believe in ghosts. But, I just like the what if and then coming back to reality afterwards, not just like getting so far off on this tangent like I'm kind of doing here, that this is your whole way of life now, is supporting this, and this, and you refuse to listen to anything else,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I could be wrong about everything that I believe in the museum, and I'm willing to accept that, like, it's just, I don't know, an exercise in like keeping the world a bigger place than a lot of people like to make it,
Yeah, normal's boring.
Yeah,
Normal is
exactly.
boring.
So I like to think there's little green men under the city. That
Yeah,
giant
exactly.
stingrays flying in the sky. It's like, I want to live in this reality.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I do believe we're kind of wrapping up on our time. And is there anything else you want to say to either skeptics or believers out there?
Well, no matter who you are, you should come by the museum and check it out.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We're downtown Somerset, so come by and say hi sometime.
Yeah, they'll love to have you. And so, this is SCC's The Gateway leaving you off to have a happy Halloween and to keep an open mind. Thank you all very much for watching, and thank you, Mr. Kadel, for joining us today.
Thanks so much.
For more information on SCC's student newspaper, The Bridge, or the Gateway Video Podcast, email us at sccthebridge@yahoo.com or contact one of the course advisors.
This is the Gateway signing out.
1, 2, 3,